Hello everyone. It is 1600, so it's now time for the Nintendo DS hardware hacking presentation. Your speakers are Marcel Klein, Tobias Grotzmacher, I'm sorry, and Mario Mano. Can I get a round of applause? Thank you. Here are your speakers.
Yeah, welcome to our Nintendo DS presentation. We are going to talk about the Nintendo DS, which is really great for gaming. We are first doing a little introduction on the hardware. Then we are going to tell you how you can run your own code, show you some homebrew software and the DS Linux, talk about the emulators, and of course the last section is about the games and the Wi-Fi play. So let's start with the introduction. The Nintendo DS actually sold 27 million times up until now, which is really quite a lot. And the photo is the new Nintendo DS in this kind of stylish Apple look thing. The hardware consists of two LCD screens at a low resolution, but that's actually something you don't. It's not really important because the screens are not that big. We have two CPUs. One is an ARM9 and the other is an ARM7. The ARM7 is actually used to play Game Boy Advanced games, GBA games. So it's for compatibility, and it's used as a minor processor in some games, for example, for the Wi-Fi. 4 megabytes of memory, which is not really much if you want to do homebrew, but we'll come to this later. We have the Wi-Fi interface on the Nintendo DS, which is a really great thing, and it supports the B standard and the proprietary Nintendo NiFi protocol, which is great for local games, but it's NiFi. And so you can also do standard TCP/IP for internet play, but we'll come to this later. We have the usual combination of buttons, A, B, X, Y, and L and R. Well, what you know, it's a digital control pad, integrated microphone, and stereo speakers. And Nintendo actually uses the microphone in games. So there are games where you have to make noises into the microphone, talk to your dog, or I don't know. The battery lasts about 10 hours. It's a proprietary battery pack, and it's rechargeable. We have actually two slots where we can put in cartridges, games. The first one is the GBA slot, and it's on the lower part of the console. The other one is the NDS slot. They call it slot 1. It's on the top part, and it's actually quite small. ROMs are about up to 128 megabytes. Yeah, the GBA, Game Boy Advanced, is the predecessor of the Nintendo DS in some ways. It had the ARM7 CPU, and a coprocessor was a Z80, of course, to be able to play Game Boy games. The rest of the hardware is quite usual stuff. You can look it up. It's not that different. It's not as fast as the DS, etc. There was no copy protection on the Game Boy Advanced. That changed in the DS, actually. Here's a little Game Boy timeline. I think most of you will remember these consoles. The classic Game Boy and the Game Boy Color. About 9 years later, there were a few consoles in between. And this thing and this classic Nintendo look is the Game Boy Advanced, which was predecessed by the Game Boy Advanced SP and the Game Boy Micro, all playing the same cartridges. Yeah, actually what's interesting us in this talk is the firmware, and the firmware of the Nintendo DS is the thing which is responsible for nearly every operation, and it's a basic user interface, and that's where PictoChat comes from, and I think we'll show PictoChat later. at some point, or maybe you already know it. It's a kind of instant messaging for your local area network. And all the communication between the dual screen and the cartridge in slot 1 is encrypted. But the game header is unencrypted. So Nintendo offers this service which is download play. That's actually a thing you do in your local area network, so you only have to buy one game. So the other players can download this game from your console and play with you together until you shut off your DS and their game is gone. So these downloads need to be signed to execute properly with the original firmware. And if you want to change the firmware to be able to run your own code, then you have to flash the NDS. Flashing, I think it's on a later slide as well. Flashing is actually done by shortening in jumper, because the first area of the ROM is read-only. So you have to open up your battery pack and put in a screwdriver or something so you can flash the whole ROM, replace the whole firmware. Yeah, I think I'll let Toby talk, tell you about how you can actually run your own code.
Okay. Running your own code. Most people who started the DS homebrew scene had already GBA flashcards. So the idea was to first try just to run DS code from the GBA slot. So there are different types of flashcards available. The older ones are just your usual flashcard, programmable with USB or even a parallel port interface. Newer ones use SD or compact flashcard. We have here visible three devices, the EZ4 Lite, which uses actually micro SD, the G6 Flash, which is a classical flash cartridge, and the M3 Movie Player 3 SD Slim. The one with not slim is as big as your old Game Boy Classic cartridges, which looks quite ugly in the DS. So they made the slim one, which looks actually quite good in the DS Fat, but looks not so good in the DS Lite, but it works. Actually, there is a new one from M3 available, the M3 SD Lite, which uses Transflash and fits snugly into the DS Lite. So, how do we run DS code from the GBA slot? The first idea was we try to hack the download play. This thing is called Wi-Fi-Me. The idea was that you replay a captured original DS download play and change some things to let the firmware jump into your GBA ROM space and execute code from there. The only package which is of interest is a normal. The DS download play uses normal Wi-Fi methods to associate the DS consoles and then transfers the code. The code is signed with RSA technology. This is why every DS has printed a RSA secured bumper on the back. And there's one packet which includes the whole RSA signature stuff. They made a slight mistake. This RSA frame itself is not signed. It only signs everything following from it, there's following an NDS header. which is also present in the games on the cartridges, and then the ARM7 and ARM9 code. And in the RSS A-frame, there is the ARM9 and ARM7 execute address. So you can patch these addresses. And you take a captured download game, patch these two addresses, wait until the download finishes. The DS says, well, the signature is OK. Let's jump to these addresses. And hooray, we are running our own code. This is quite a nice method because you don't have to modify the hardware. The next step was it's quite inconvenient to always have a PC at your side when you want to run homebrew code. So the next one tries a similar trick with original games. It's called PassMe, or the commercial variant named PassKey. And the whole code on the DS slot is encrypted and must be authenticated. And this device sits between a game and the DS, and also patches the execution addresses. Because the first part, the header, where the execution addresses are stored on the ROM, are not encrypted. So this tool can patch this. But Nintendo fixes bugs. Newer versions of the DS, and that includes almost all DS released in Europe, are fixed to defeat Wi-Fi-Me and PassMe. Wi-Fi-Me does not work on any of the new hardware, and I don't think that it will ever be reactivated. And the PassMe does not work anymore because the firmware does not allow a DS-ROM to jump into GBA address space. Okay, so we do something else. Introducing PassMe 2, or the commercial variant PassKey 2. This is a dirty hack, a very dirty hack. Don't worry if you don't understand this part. It's simplified and is still complicated. It patches the games to jump to specific positions into the games where specific operations are located, which make the game again jump into GBA SRAM space. This is where the GBA save games are stored. And then we are in GBA SRAM, which is quite good because we can modify it, but not so funny since it's only an 8-bit bus and the DS makes 16-bit transfers. So you read 1 byte and always get 2 duplicate bytes. That restricts the instructions you can execute quite a lot. But someone really got it and built with this very restricted instruction set code which jumps back to the GBA card. And voila, we can execute code again. This is the preferred method today to execute code on your DS. Ah, no. The encryption of the Nintendo DS slot was cracked eventually. There is actually something that's called NoPass from the community, Passcard 3 or SuperKey from the commercial vendors, and it looks like a it looks like a normal DS game, but you put it into your DS and it boots directly into the GBA mode, into the GBA address space. Quite convenient. And this is an alternative to flashing your firmware if you don't want to carry around something that sticks out of your DS and makes it quite ugly. The passkey sticks out quite a lot. And so you have it, NoPass that executes code from the GBA card every time. And now there are some flashcards emerging for the slot 1, for the NDS slot, which use knowledge of the reverse-engineered crypto system that Nintendo used. They're only available commercially. I don't know if the homebrew community has information about this encryption protocol. I could find none. So, you have currently 2 or 3 options. One is using a NoPass and a GBA flashcard. The other is using a DS flashcard, which has the disadvantage that you can't run GBA games from it. Or you flash your firmware. You exchange Nintendo's firmware with a firmware that can run DS code from the GBA slot. So, we're coming to Marcel, Homebrew. And the first one is the new FlashMe, the firmware that can replace the Nintendo firmware.
Oh, it's this one.
Yeah, as you already said, it's not only possible to run games on the Nintendo DS, but you can also run homebrew software. And the software you want to run is new firmware. That's the FlashMe firmware. So you can run the homebrew software and the commercial games to bypass the code. Yeah, and one example of software which runs on the Nintendo DS is, for example, the train. The subway train of Berlin. Somebody wrote this little program, and you can see how the lines are driving and where you can find them. And there are several other nice programs like a PDA software, for example, DS Organize. You have a calendar there and an address book and an IRC client, which works actually quite nice, but the developer isn't active anymore because he has an agreement with the community, but the source code and the software is still available on some mirrors in the internet, so you can still download it. This is DS Organize. You can see on the top screen some information, and on the lower screen you have a touch screen. You can run the calendar there, and it works. Another nice application is the Moonshell. The Moonshell is when it's a program to run movies and music. So it's a very nice MP3 player. It's possible to run MP3s and OGG files, and the newer version also plays lossless files like TTA or AAC. That's Okay, that's the screensaver of the Moonshell.
Oh, it's dark.
Yeah. And another nice application is the Wi-Fi lab. So you can scan the local Wi-Fi network and still live capture some packages which are floating around, but you can't save them on. But you can't save them on the SD card. So here you see the access points, which the Nintendo DS captures here. Yeah. And this is a nice application too.
Oh, can I interrupt for a moment? Well, it's really a nice application. It's available in source code, and the author himself doesn't really want to do a VLAN scanner, a Wi-Fi scanner. And it would be really great to have some network penetration applications on the DS. so, okay.
Yeah. So, like a Kismet for 10 hours or something like that. Yeah. These were and there are also open source games, not only commercial games, which are categorized as homebrew software. For example, only Wii. This is a nice racing game, but it's actually quite difficult, and the maps are generated. The maps are generated on the fly, so you always have a new map when you play the game, and the graphics is pretty nice, but it's not working. Okay, this happens.
So what's our next part?
DS Linux.
DS Linux.
DS Linux is a Linux port for the Nintendo DS. Mainly developed by 3 developers: Malcolm Pepsman Parsons, Stefan STSP Spelling, and Wolfgang Amadeus Moos. It is based on UC Linux because the DS has no memory management unit. And the DS is quite low on RAM, but someone came up with a nice fix for that, or workaround, because the additional RAM that we get is a little bit slower than the main memory. The preferred port now uses RAM present on the supercard or the M3. So DS Linux has 36 megabytes of RAM available. That is quite a lot for many things you maybe want to do on an embedded Linux platform. But this means, since this additional RAM is needed, really is needed, there is currently no support for any slot 1 flash cards planned, because these flash cards are unable to map any RAM into the GBA RAM space. The kernel supports all DS hardware except the sound input. So the microphone does not work under DS Linux. But Wi-Fi works. There are quite a few console applications that work. But this has currently no graphical user interface. It's only console, really in a very early stage of development. Maybe another problem is that nobody has quite figured out how to port a standard GUI to 2 screens where only one is a touch screen. Yeah, what applications do we have? Not much at the moment. We have BusyBox, so all usual shell tools are available. We have a SSH client. We have Lynx with SSL support. So you can try to check webmail. We have the BitchX IRC client. We have MatPlay, so you may be able to stream MP3 onto your DS. And we have the whole lot of the BSD games. So if you want to play some nice Hangman, or always wanted to play Hunt the Wumpus on the run, now you can play all those classic games on your DS. Yeah. Emulators.
Yeah.
And the next point is when you want to run homebrew software or Nintendo DS games on your PC. No.
It's okay. Oh, die Folien. Oh, can we get the slides back?
The slides. Yeah, when you want to run homebrew software or Nintendo DS games on your PC, you can try to emulate them. So you can download some software. One of the most advanced emulator is probably the Dualis or the NoGBR, which is actually a debugger for GBR and Nintendo DS games, but you can play homebrew software with it. And it's nice to mention also an open source project, which is very important. That's DSMU Me, which is actually quite nice and works most of the time. Or yeah, I tried it and it worked. And another nice thing for the Nintendo DS is when you want to play some other games on your NDS. This is also homebrew software, so you can emulate SNES games or GBC or GB games, and you can also play SCUM VM games on your Nintendo DS. There's a nice SCUM VM port for the Nintendo DS, and so you can play Monkey Island, yeah, on the fly.
Maybe we can show Monkey Island?
No, I don't have brought it with me.
There's a GB emulator. The Game Boy emulator is on the card. I have some.
Not one.
Oh.
Yeah, that's going to happen a lot from now on when we show stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to search around, and I don't know, we haven't found a solution yet. Maybe we should record it on video beforehand, but it's not really live then, isn't it? So, the Game Boy. So since we have no Z80 processor anymore, we only have this ARM7, ARM9, so we actually need a software emulator. Can you read? Oh.
Das ist Yeah, this is a Zelda emulation, so you can play Zelda on the Nintendo DS, and the new Nintendo DS version is coming out.
Oh, contribution from the audience. Great.
Yeah. So here we have also Monkey Island.
No, stop playing.
Yeah, I think everyone wanted to see that.
We forgot it.
Thanks.
Yeah, and these games work quite nice, and it's very much fun to play this.
So, yeah.
Oh, games, yeah.
Games. The Nintendo Wi-Fi connection. Some commercial games support internet play. They use Nintendo's master servers. Some of them are located at GameSpy, and many games can also be played via a local Wi-Fi, like Mario Kart. And yeah, the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection uses for the login of the DS to the Nintendo servers SSL version 3. And yes, the certificate is checked. And this is quite nice because Nintendo has a nice contract with T-Mobile in Germany. So you can use these T-Mobile hotspots in Germany without paying. And it even works with the Opera web browser that is available for the Nintendo DS. And, whoops, the ROMs have the URL of the authentication server in plain text. I wonder what happens if someone replaces HTTPS with HTTP. No, I haven't tried it. Oh, and there are games for it.
Oh, yeah, I'm talking about games because... Whoa, sorry. Because I was asked before the presentation what's best to start on the Nintendo DS, and someone already bought it and stuff. And well, I was like, yeah, but it's nice to develop if you're interested into embedded systems and stuff. But it's actually you should buy it if you want to play with it, because the games are really great. And for example, take the Linux on the DS. It's a really, really great thing, and it's fascinating stuff, but it doesn't really actually do something except booting Linux using some of the hardware, but you are not going to run a web browser. Of course, there is a web browser, but it's in text mode, which is really great. Yeah, and you can run an X server. There are several small X servers for embedded systems and stuff, and that's all really really there. But the main part, I think, are the games. And well, I found this photo on the internet, and these are, I guess, some of the most famous games and some of the most sold games. And well, they are really good. I think Mario Kart is a really fun thing. Well, Metroid Prime Hunters was this 3D multiplayer shooter thing with up to 4 players, I think, and internet play, complete with ranking. And well, of course, there's Tetris because it's Nintendo. Then this Brain Age game, which they sold to these new customer groups, which they are reaching out for. So it's actually, I think they have an advertisement with someone in the late 60s or so who says, well, I'm using Brain Age and my brain doesn't age as fast as yours. I don't know. Well, there's this adventure Phoenix Wright, and of course, Phoenix Wright is really great. It's this thing where you can actually, you play this lawyer, and at certain points in the game you can shout "objection" into your microphone, and the game stops. And yeah, Advanced Wars is strategy, Animal Crossing. It's 2 times here on the stack, and I think it's because the owner is, he wants to cheat a little bit or something. Because you can actually, it's a good game to own twice. Yeah, Trauma Center, maybe you've read about it. That's a simulation of a hospital. You are a doctor and you actually cut people open and you use your touchpad with a scalpel, yeah, as a knife. And later it gets a little science fiction. You hunt strange critters inside human bodies and stuff. And it's really great if you want to keep people busy. Yeah, Super Mario is actually a great game, and it's a nice concept. I want to see more. It's a 2D game with a 3D engine, and it really looks good. And, well, a lot of new games and great games are missing here, and I'm not sure if I should talk about those as well. I think Nintendogs is something you have to talk about, because Nintendogs is really this Tamagotchi thing on a new level, where you have this dog and you care for your dog and you have to pet him on the touch screen and teach him voice commands, and you really can't play this in the tuber. So not in places where other people might listen to you. And the greatest thing I heard about this game is when you play it and you put your DS into standby, so you just shut it, and you walk by someone who also owns Nintendogs, the Nintendo is going to bark, which is really the next level, yeah. Yeah, that's. I think that's the games section. Nintendo seems to be fearful of real multiplayer games, so most of this is simple competitional stuff like Mario Kart with rankings. So mostly just fun.
Metroid Prime Hunters. Regarding Metroid Prime Hunters, I say it's quite an experience to play an ego shooter with a stylus.
Yeah.
And the multiplayer mode for internet is really great. You have your standard deathmatch, capture the flag, domination, the usual stuff, but on this small screen. And it looks really great.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe we should have put this slide first, because we actually have games for the DS. So, and lots of them. In Europe, there are 230 titles, USA 300, Japan 400, I don't know. So there are really a lot of games out there. Of course, Japanese is the thing where all the great games are, and we only get, the bottom line or the most important titles. And the games which appear only in German were Ab durch die Hecke. Yeah. This is, there's also, I don't know about Nintendo Europe, but I think these guys are strange, and they are doing a strange marketing job, and they are doing a strange price policy. Take Electroplankton, for example. Electroplankton is one of the most famous DS games, and it's actually sold here for 30 or 40 euros. It was a giveaway in Japan, because, we wouldn't really classify it as a game. It's more an interactive, I don't know, you do strange stuff. It's about sound somewhat. Maybe can one of you explain Electroplankton?
It's not really a game, so you can make music with it, but it's not really.
Yeah, very meditating stuff. And
experimental sound design comes to mind, but without saving, so nothing for professional use.
There's one stage where small fish are jumping, and you caught them in a plant, and while they drop on the leaves, they make funny noises. And well, it's really fun. Really great. Yeah. For the future, apart from new games. We hope to see more reliable slot 1 flashcards. From what we gathered, this slot 1 approach is still really new, and new means maybe you need to use software which isn't really working yet. Maybe the games need to be patched before you can use them, or Homebrew will not run from your slot 1 card, and the slot 1 card is, I don't know, I saw one which was about 20 centimeters long, sticking out of the DS, I think it's one.
Yeah, but the newer slot cards like CM Dry simply doesn't stick out. It's like a DS game, but the problem is, or the non-feature is that you can't play GBA games with the slot 1 cards, and so you still need a card for the slot 2 to run GBA games, or you emulate them, but why to emulate something when you have the hardware for it?
Yeah, the Linux GUI and applications are still missing. Now with the 36 megabytes of memory, it should be possible, maybe even to implement a shell with shell completion and history and stuff. Already done, yeah. And yeah, that's great. And that's really, 4 megabytes are really not much, but 36 is really great. And that's actually a project which is still working, and well, it's really something as an open source fan or developer, I don't know, which is familiar to me, or which I can understand, because lots of this homebrew scene stuff is quite alien for me. Developers are vanishing into thin air, the source code is gone, and mirrors on strange websites. But DS Linux is really your standard open source thing, I think. And it's really great. Yeah, more Wi-Fi homebrew, so maybe we should port Kismet or something. And who put this point up?
I did this. I think it would be really great if someone would write a game that DS and PlayStation Portable players could play together. There is one?
Tic-tac-toe game.
Wow,
Oh,
tic-tac-toe game.
Tic-tac-toe.
I think that a tic-tac-toe game, I think that amazes me for 5 minutes.
Well, but nice proof of concept.
Tetris would be nice.
Tetris, yeah. Yeah, so I think, yeah, we have at the end of the presentation some links, and I don't know, well, this is not really a complete list. But, so thank you very much. Well, we can talk about the DS some more. Normally, we do this thing more communication, and we already did it twice, and it was more of a discussion. So maybe we can talk about it. Thanks.